I grew up in a house built above my family's hospital. My parents were doctors, so from an early age, the contrast between life and death was something I could feel around me, almost as if it was something physical. Our apartment was on the third floor, but below us, just one story down, the hospital stood, filled with memories of pain, suffering, and sometimes something worse. Even as a kid, I always felt a presence in that building, especially in the shadows. I never dared to linger in dark rooms or hallways alone. It felt as if something or someone was watching me from the shadows, waiting for just the right moment to make itself known. I think everyone's afraid of the dark at some point, but this wasn't a phase, it was my reality. I couldn't sleep alone until I was nearly 20. But the worst of it began when I was 11. My dad wasn't home that night, so I was sleeping next to my mom when I felt the familiar, terrifying sensation. Sleep paralysis. If you've never experienced it, let me try to explain. Your body is awake, but your brain still believes it's in a dream state, paralyzing you to protect you from acting out your dreams. Only that night, I opened my eyes and it was a nightmare that greeted me. I was frozen, unable to move or scream, and that's when I saw them shadowy figures around the room whispering, chanting in a language I didn't understand. They closed in on me, and I felt something colder than ice clamped down on my chest. And then, as if in answer to the shadow's whispers, she appeared, a woman, with blistered, peeling skin and sunken eyes that glowed a dull red, was sitting on top of me, watching me with hollow, dead-eyed. I wanted to scream for my mother, who was just inches away, but nothing would come out. I tried to move, tried to lift even a finger, but my body was frozen under her weight. She didn't move, didn't blink, just sat there, staring. Her tangled hair covered half her face, but the one eye I could see was fixed on me, wide, unblinking. Her mouth was barely open, and I could almost hear her breathing. It was a rasping, guttural sound that made my skin crawl. Then I felt her fingers, cold and rough, pressing down on my shoulders as she leaned in, her weight crushing, suffocating. I remembered what my mom had told me about calling on Jesus for protection against spirits. Desperate, I shut my eyes and began praying, "Jesus, please protect me." Over and over in my mind, I called to him, my only hope in that moment. I could still feel her weight on my chest, her gaze burning through my eyelids, but I focused all my energy on those words, and eventually, she was gone. Years passed, and I tried to put that night behind me, convincing myself it was just a dream. But 2 years later, while watching a documentary about alien abductions, I saw something that made my blood run cold. They showed a reenactment of a Japanese phenomenon involving sleep paralysis, and they described a woman who appeared in dreams sitting on people's chests. The face they recreated on the screen, it was her. The same decayed skin, the same bloodshot eye peeking out from her hair. I shut off the TV and ran to my mom, trembling, unable to shake the memory. My fear of the dark grew worse. It followed me everywhere, even into adulthood. Eventually, I began meditating, thinking it might help me move past the fear. I shared an office space with my friend Mark, and some nights we'd meditate together in a small garage in my building. But one night, as we meditated in the pitch-black room, I felt the darkness closing in, suffocating. I felt her presence, stronger than ever. My skin prickled, and I couldn't shake the feeling that she was there, just waiting for me to open my eyes. Afterward, Mark turned to me, his face pale, and whispered, "Did you feel that?" We were both shaken, both sure that something dark had been there with us. That's when I decided to ask a psychic friend to visit the building. Without knowing anything about my story, he walked directly to that same corner of the garage. He told me that the place had seen darkness, real darkness, and warned that an entity lingered there. He sensed something demonic had been attached to the building for years. My mind flashed back to my old room, to that night when I was 11, and suddenly it all connected. Later, I told my grandfather, who had owned the building for decades. He looked at me with a grave expression and admitted that, over the years, patients recovering in the hospital had reported feeling a heavy weight pressing down on them, as though someone was sitting on their chest. Some even saw the same woman, haunting their hospital beds, watching them, waiting. After that, we brought in a priest, held prayer services, and lit candles, hoping to drive her away for good. I'd like to think it worked, but sometimes in the quiet of the night, I still feel those eyes on me. I still wonder if she's truly gone, or if she's just waiting for me to open my eyes once more. If you enjoyed this story, remember, sometimes the things we fear are more real than we'd like to believe. It started like any ordinary week, but it quickly spiraled into something terrifying. After what I thought was a brief respite from the paranormal disturbances in my apartment, the nightmares crept back in. Whispers echoed through the hallways, slamming doors shattered the silence, and a horrible rasping breath emerged from the fireplace, sending shivers down my spine. I had no idea that this was just the beginning. Then there was my little porcelain cat figurine. I had found it in a thrift shop weeks earlier and thought it would make a charming addition to my collection. But something about it felt off. One fateful evening, I noticed it was weeping, a dark, viscous liquid oozing from its eyes, pooling onto the shelf beneath it. I stared in disbelief, a chill running through me. I had to get rid of it, but I hesitated. Could this be a trick of the light? Surely, this couldn't be real. Then came the night when the atmosphere in my apartment shifted. I woke up suddenly, heart racing, feeling an ominous presence looming over me. I glanced at the cat figurine, which now seemed to pulse with a life of its own. The whispers grew louder, echoing my name in a twisted melody. I scrambled out of bed, only to find the air thick with an unseen energy, suffocating in its intensity. I made the rash decision to leave my apartment and check into a nearby hotel. My heart raced as I packed, and I brought my beloved cat, a sweet tabby, with me. I thought a change of scenery might bring me peace. As I settled into the hotel room, I tried to distract myself by scrolling through my phone. I was met with an overwhelming wave of messages, many offering advice on how to deal with haunted objects. One message stood out. A friend urged me to burn the figurine. "It's a vessel," she warned, for something dark. "You have to destroy it before it takes you." The idea terrified me, but I was desperate. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, my every move tracked by something sinister. That evening, I decided to face my fears. I gathered my courage and set up a small area in the hotel room, using the desk lamp to illuminate the dark corners. With my cat safely perched on my bed, I placed the porcelain cat figurine in the center of the room. I lit a candle and took a deep breath, repeating a mantra I'd learned from a documentary about paranormal phenomena. Light over darkness, peace over chaos. As I chanted, I noticed the shadows around me began to shift, swirling like smoke in a windstorm. The temperature in the room plummeted, and I felt an icy draft cutting through the air. It was as if the room itself were alive, protesting my actions. The whispers grew louder, coiling around me, begging me to stop, but I pressed on, the words tumbling from my lips like a spell meant to banish evil. Just as I was about to finish my chant, the figurine shattered, sending shards of porcelain flying across the room. My heart sank as I instinctively shielded my face. The air filled with a rancid stench like something long dead, and then everything fell silent. The shadows receded, and I felt a sudden calm wash over me. But as I looked down, my heart raced anew. Among the shards of the figurine, I saw something glimmering. It was a small, rusted key. Confused, I picked it up, its cold metal sending a shiver down my spine. What could it possibly unlock? My mind raced with possibilities. Determined to find out, I slipped the key into my pocket and spent the next day searching the hotel for any doors it might fit. I asked the staff about any locked rooms, but they seemed puzzled by my inquiries. After hours of searching, I finally stumbled upon an old dusty door in the basement, a door that looked like it hadn't been opened in years. With shaking hands, I inserted the key and turned it. The lock clicked open and I pushed the door ajar, revealing a dimly lit room filled with old furniture and strange artifacts. In the center stood a large mirror, cracked and dusty. I stepped closer, my heart pounding in my chest, compelled by a force I couldn't understand. Suddenly, the mirror flickered to life, showing me images of the past. Shadows dancing, figures trapped, and a woman in anguish. The energy of the room surged, and I realized that the porcelain cat hadn't just been a cursed object. It was a gateway, a beacon for something trapped within the mirror. But it was too late. The presence had already been unleashed. The shadows from the mirror spilled into the room, swirling around me like a dark tempest. I felt a pull, a desire to step through the mirror and join the chaos. I fought against it, recalling the mantra I had chanted earlier. Light over darkness, peace over chaos. With all my strength, I shouted the words, forcing the shadows back. They recoiled, hissing and writhing as I stood my ground. Just when it seemed I would be overwhelmed, the mirror cracked further and the shadows dissipated into the air, leaving behind a heavy silence. As the last remnants of the dark energy vanished, I collapsed to the floor, gasping for breath. I had faced my fears and emerged victorious, but I knew this was only the beginning. I still had questions about the cat, the key, and the mirror. I had stepped into a world filled with darkness, but I had also discovered a flicker of light within me, igniting a path forward. Determined to uncover the truth, I made a promise to myself. I would learn more about the strange forces at play, not just for me, but for anyone else who might be caught in this web of shadows. The battle wasn't over. It had only just begun. I'm an 18-year-old female living in Australia, and this is a story that still haunts me, even 4 years later. It all began when I was just 14, still in high school, and the events unfolded on an ordinary Monday afternoon. After a long day of classes, I had band practice scheduled from 3 to 5 p.m. Our school had a large grass oval bordered by towering gum trees, which provided a seemingly serene escape. Usually, after practice, I would cross the oval to reach the train station on the other side. It was a familiar route, a shortcut that most students took without a second thought. But on this day, I was alone. My friends and classmates had either been picked up by their parents or left earlier, and for some reason I felt no hesitation about crossing the oval by myself. I told myself it was just a 5-minute walk in broad daylight, and I was eager to catch my train. As I walked across the oval, my heavy backpack slung over my shoulder and my clarinet in hand, everything felt normal, until I was about halfway across. Suddenly I heard a man's voice from behind me. "Excuse me, could you help me?" At first, the voice seemed harmless, lacking any threatening undertones. I figured it was someone who needed directions. Without thinking, I turned around. What I saw then sent chills down my spine. A disheveled man, probably in his 30s, lay sprawled under one of the gum trees, partially hidden from view. Next to him sat a yellow-striped tennis bag, and in his hand, he gripped something fleshy and pink. It took a moment for my mind to process what I was seeing, and when it did, nausea washed over me. It was clear he was engaged in something incredibly inappropriate. The man stared at me with a twisted grin, his eyes darting down to what he was doing before he locked his gaze back on me. A surge of fear coursed through me. I clenched my fists, panic rising in my chest, and spun back around, quickening my pace toward the train station. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to run. I could feel my heart pounding, waiting for him to call out or chase after me. "Hey, excuse me," his voice called again, but I refused to look back. With each hurried step, I forced myself to remain calm, as if that would somehow protect me. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I reached the train station platform. The sight of other waiting passengers brought me a brief sense of relief, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. As the train approached, I caught a glimpse of the man again. He was standing, that same yellow-striped bag now slung over his shoulder. He walked lazily toward his station, moving as if he had all the time in the world, as if this were just another failed attempt to lure in an unsuspecting child. I hopped onto the train and immediately looked back, my eyes glued to the window as he faded into the distance. I exhaled deeply, realizing I had been holding my breath the whole time. It was a small victory, but I still felt unsettled. Pulling out my phone, I called my mom, my voice trembling as I told her something bad had happened. The worry in her voice was palpable, and she hurried to pick me up from the nearby train stop. Once home, I relayed the entire harrowing experience to her. She listened intently, her concern deepening with every word. Without hesitation, she took me to the police station where I made a statement. The entire ordeal felt overwhelming for a 14-year-old retelling the events over and over again, reliving the fear. A couple of weeks later, I received a call back from the police. They had not found the man. The news sent another wave of dread through me. From that day forward, I always asked my mom to pick me up after band practice, or I would take the long route around the oval with my friends, avoiding that shortcut entirely. What still sickens me is the knowledge that this man lay right next to a school, fully aware of the innocent children passing by. I can only hope that he never tried to pull his disgusting antics on any other unsuspecting victims. In a world that feels so safe, moments like these remind us of the darkness that can lurk just beyond our sight. And as I reflect on that day, I can't help but wonder how many other children have crossed paths with the unknown, unaware of the dangers that hide in plain sight. If you found this story haunting and want to hear more tales that send shivers down your spine, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Join our growing community of horror enthusiasts who crave more spine-tingling encounters, creepy mysteries, and the supernatural. Don't forget to ring that notification bell so you never miss a new episode. Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. We'd love to hear your stories. Thank you for listening, and remember, sometimes the scariest stories are the ones that hit closest to home. Stay safe out there, and until next time, keep your lights on and your doors locked.